Hello, everyone, and many thanks for joining today's stream. This is second news update for day. First one is already published since 11, I believe, in the morning on my Patreon and Boosting pages. And if you like my work and want to support, there is no better way to do it than to subscribe to my Patreon and Boosty pages and become a sponsor of this project. As always, I have prepared, and dear friends, this evening at 10 p.m. I will have a third news update for a day. So joining if you will have a time. And yes, as always, I have prepared quite a number of news for this update. Although before I start, let me make a little announcement that I spoke about during the yesterday's evening update, which is that in order to keep this live stream around the hour, I will, of course, react on the questions or the comments, if there will be any, through either a super chat feature on Rumble, Round as it's called there, or through PayPal or Boosty during the streams. Otherwise, after news segment, I will end the update on that and begin working on the next update. And as always, on Sundays, we will have our traditional big community chat. And I will try to be as informative during that chat as I possibly can while being engaged in a conversation with the community. So, okay, I don't think I have to mention this changer every time I will launch a stream. Probably it's enough now. I made an announcement yesterday, today, so okay. That's been said, dear friends. So let's start the news update itself now. And well, first report is from RIA Novosti, which is that Trump, president of US, confirmed information that was circulating on internet. A number of media outlets were reporting about it, and I also shared this information with you that this Friday on 17th of October, Zelensky will have a meeting with the US president in Washington, in the White House, and he was asked about it, if this information is correct, and he said that he answered, "I think so," which is a positive answer, I guess. So this Friday we should expect some interesting, maybe, statements from White House, from Trump and Zelensky. Topic of discussion, of course, is going to be long-range weapon systems that US will deploy against Russia, while Zelensky will take blame on that. Of course, US leadership will prefer to maintain plausible deniability, and they will say, well, it's not us, by the way, these Tomahawk missiles, these ATACMS missiles, and everything else, it's all Zelensky, it's all Kiev regime, right? But we all understand and know perfectly well that all these long-range strikes cannot be done without direct participation of US intelligence and military personnel. But nevertheless, let's wait until 17 and see what these people gonna say. But when it comes to ATACMS, today we have some update on this topic. And for example, Financial Times reported that if formally Kiev regime, in reality, if US will deploy ATACMS against Russia, number may be around 20 to 50. Well, this so-called media outlet, Financial Times, is reporting about it with sadness. With the sadness, for them, number is not that impressive. Seems like because, well, US needs those missiles in some other places, allegedly. Although last time I checked, US was not officially engaged in any wars, but even one ATACMS missiles is way too much, right? Because yet again, Russian president, other Russian high-ranking officials were very clear that this missile system cannot be deployed against Russia without direct involvement of Pentagon. And if these missiles are launched, Moscow will interpret that as a direct attack from US, right? And appropriate measures will be taken. It is anybody's guess what this appropriate measure is going to be. because we have heard strong statements from Moscow before attacks, strikes on Russia, before HIMARS strikes on Russia, before Western fighter jets, for example, F-16s were deployed, Storm Shadow British cruise missiles or French Scalp PG cruise missiles. So therefore, I don't even have a guess what Moscow might do if and when Tomahawks and potentially some other long-range weapon systems will be deployed against Russia by the US and their other NATO member states. But I guess we will find out, because at this point it seems like this next phase of escalation is absolutely inevitable, unfortunately. But let me give you some details on this report from Financial Times. United States will only be able to supply Ukraine with up to 50 Tomahawk missiles, the Financial Times reports, citing Stacy Petion, director of the defense program at the CNAS think tank. And we have quotes here: Washington could allocate 20 to 50 Tomahawk missiles to Kiev, which would not have a decisive impact on the dynamics of the war. Publication said, according to former Pentagon official Mark Cancel, US has 4,150 of these missiles. However, Washington will likely only be able to supply Kiev with a few units. Experts believe this is because of the 200 missiles purchased since 2022, more than 120 have already been used, I guess, against Houthi rebels. And the 2026 budget only plans to fund 57 units. Moreover, as the newspaper notes, the US may need such weapons for strikes against Venezuela. If Pentagon plans to strike Venezuela with 4,000 Tomahawk missiles, 4,150, that is counted in the stockpile of Pentagon, then, well, that's quite something. But nevertheless, share your take, dear friends, what you think. Is this a part, kind of deception operation again on part of Washington, on part of Western so-called elites and so-called media that is controlled by them, or something else is going on? Because yet again, deployment of even one Tomahawk missiles is far too many, and this media outlet is clearly pushing the narrative that, well, it's only 20 to 50 missiles will be deployed if this is nothing, right? This is a big deal, because Russian side cannot know if any or all these missiles, if launched against Russia, have nuclear warheads in it. And as a former Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev, stated a couple of days ago, how should anybody here in Russia, military or political leadership, knew how they can know what kind of warhead these missiles have? Even if interception of the missiles themselves is not going to be much of a deal for Russian integrated air defense systems. But nevertheless, this risk that some of them might be tipped with the nuclear warheads, of course, makes all the difference, I guess. And yet again, we can only speculate how Moscow will react if Tomahawks are launched, but probably there will be some reaction this time around. And we will see strikes not just on Kiev control territory, but potentially on the military assets of NATO member states that are engaged in this proxy war against Russia. All of this is guess, of course, on my part. Only few people in Kremlin probably know what will be Russia's response. Nevertheless, because topic of Tomahawk cruise missiles is become quite relevant last couple of weeks, the U.S. military-industrial complex is, of course, using this opportunity and showcasing their ground-based launchers for these missiles. And for example, in Washington, there is a military exhibition in which Oshkosh contractor of the Pentagon, part of military-industrial complex, presented vehicle-based launcher of the Tomahawk missiles that are allegedly can be launched into mass production immediately. if contract is signed. Let me give you some details on that. At an exhibition in Washington, the American company Oshkosh presented their new mobile launchers for Tomahawk missiles. News agencies are reporting their developments were presented at the Association of the U.S. Army exhibition in Washington. Oshkosh has unveiled for the first time their XMAV, basically, an autonomous mobile vehicle armed with their Tomahawk ground launch missile designed to support future long-range munitions. Also on display at their exhibition were the light multi-purpose LMAV, designed to combat drones, and the medium autonomous MAV with their multiple launch rocket systems. And you can see these systems, by the way, right on your screen at this point. This big one is a Tomahawk launcher, and these smaller ones, one is a multi-launch rocket system, and another is anti-drone warfare system. So as you can see, U.S. military industrial complex is not wasting time. They see there is a hype around the Tomahawk missiles, and they come up. Probably they already had this project, right, of ground-based Tomahawk launchers, and they stream it straight away into that exhibition in a hope that they will get some contract from Pentagon, and they might. You never know. Also, dear friends, a number of sources today reported that Russian armed forces liberated settlements of Kazatskaya and Balagan in Pokrovsk-Mirnograd direction on the southern eastern flank of Mirnograd settlements. I did share this information with the maps on my Telegram and Twitter pages, and if you want to see that in detail, you can. If you want to see a location of the settlements in regards to Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, you can check my Telegram and Twitter pages. Progress of the Russian armed forces continues, obviously, all along the front line. It's just not just Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, but literally all along the front line. Initiative is in Russian hands. Also, interesting reports that MP in Kyiv controlled territory, by the way, member of Rada, which is a parliament there, Yelena Yunchenko, stated that about 1.5 million men of conscription age in Kyiv controlled territory are listed as wanted by the territorial recruitment centers, these goons basically of Zelensky's Western-backed terrorist regime that are kidnapping people on the streets. But listen to numbers, dear friends. 1.5 million men of conscription age are enlisted as a wanted. This information alone, and this so-called MP in Kyiv controlled territory spoke about it openly during their interview on one of their so-called TV stations there, right? But numbers are quite telling, isn't it? We are not just seeing literally on daily basis when people being kidnapped all over the Kyiv controlled territory, from the streets, from their shops, from even their own homes, by the way. But now officials in Kyiv controlled territory are saying it openly that, well, 1.5 million people are avoiding being mobilized, right? They don't want to fight and die for a geopolitical agenda of the globalists, neocons, Western so-called elites, right? And their proxy terrorist regime of Zelensky, and are hiding any way they can. 1.5 million. If you add to that another 500,000 to 700,000 people that are designated by Kyiv regime as deserters, then you will get quite a good understanding of the attitude that many people, maybe not majority, but definitely many people on the Kyiv controlled territory have towards this proxy war that West is waging against Russia, while sacrificing hundreds of thousands of residents of this former Soviet republic. Quite interesting information there, I think. Also, RT reported that according to new poll data, if elections were held there now, Zelensky would lose, allegedly, Zelensky will lose not just to former head of general staff of Kiev regime, Valery Zaluzhny, who is serving now as ambassador of Kiev in UK. But Zelensky will lose also to head of main intelligence directorate of defense ministry, Kirill Budanov, which is something new, at least until now. Poll numbers were showing that there is a fight between Zelensky and Zaluzhny, and Zaluzhny was leading in the charts. But now Budanov is also on top of Zelensky, and obviously all these three individuals are terrorists and mass murderers, by the way, and should be designated as such on Russian territory. I believe Budanov is designated as a terrorist by Russian law enforcement agencies, rightfully so, and I think it is well overdue to designate as a terrorist Zelensky and Zaluzhny also, because that's what they are, terrorists and mass murderers. Anyways, let me give you some numbers from this report. So Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky would be defeated in a presidential vote by military intelligence chief Kirill Budanov, as well as former armed forces commander-in-chief Valery Zaluzhny. New poll has suggested Zelensky has repeatedly ruled out holding elections in the country, citing martial law imposed due to a conflict with Russia. According to survey released on Monday, conducted by the Kiev-based pollster Rate One, among 1,200 residents respondents in early October, Zelensky's political viability continues to wane. In a scenario when Zelensky is directly against Budanov, 33% of respondents favored their military intelligence chief, as opposed to 32.5% for Zelensky. They are head-to-head there, basically, Budanov and Zelensky, according to these polls. But in another scenario, if Zelensky is in the second tour, let's say, is up to against Zaluzhny, former head of Kiev regime's general staff, 42.6% of voters would vote for Zaluzhny, and only 26.3% would support Zelensky. Quite telling, isn't it? Direct race between Zaluzhny and Budanov would give their former a decisive leader, former general, decisive leader, with their 44.5% to 22%. Interesting data there. We should take it with a pinch of salt, obviously, because this information is coming from a Kiev-controlled territory, and I don't think Zelensky in any circumstances will manage to gain more than 10-15% of their votes, even no matter how massive the propaganda in his favor gonna be there. He is just extremely unpopular. But anyways, information is quite interesting, I think. And question I have personally is what is going on between Washington and London? Do they find the common ground in regards to who gonna replace Zelensky or not? London, as you know, dear friends, and I mentioned this million times, London is supporting Zaluzhny. He is a favorite of British so-called elites, globalists, that is, and Washington, according to some reports, by the way, Washington sometimes agrees with London that Zaluzhny should replace Zelensky, and other times Washington is coming up with some alternative candidates, and seems like Trump's administration is doing exactly that. They have some different candidates, different favorites, and among those favorites, I think we can count also former aide of Zelensky, Arestovich. And there are quite a number of indicators that he does has some links with Trump's administration. That personality, by the way, Arestovich. So we should keep some attention to that figure. Anyways, before I continue, dear friends, let me just remind you, if I may, that if you like my work, and if you want to support me, help me to maintain this project on which I'm working full time with daily overtimes. By the way, you can help through several means. You can donate to this project through PayPal or Boosty platforms. Links are on this video in description box, and will be in the pinned comment on YouTube. At least also, obviously, you can subscribe to my Patreon page or page on Boosty, where I have extra content on regular basis. And nowadays, first news update of the day is published on Patreon and Boosty. These morning updates, and that might be additional bonus, maybe for some members of our community, to support me through subscription on Patreon or Boosty. And dear friends, when it comes to these platforms, let me notice that a free subscription is not really helping. Point of these platforms is that community members are becoming a Patreon of the project, so they are subscribing, they are paid subscribers, right? And on Patreon, monthly subscription starts from $5. I'll just let you know once you open the page. By the way, once you click that link that is in the description box and will be in the pinned comment, page will open, and you will see choice there. You can subscribe for $5 or $10 or $20 or $50 or $100. Unfortunately, there are no subscribers for $50 or $100 on the Patreon for now. Maybe things will change. I don't know. Anyways, many thanks, obviously, to everyone who already helped and continues to support. And during the live streams, of course, you can also use the super chat feature on Rumble, dear friends, and also become a premium subscriber on Rumble. Okay, that's been said. Sorry for taking your time, dear friends, but as you understand, independent media projects cannot survive without community support, especially when project or channel does not has a sponsor, right? General sponsor or advertising, and I don't, right? That's been said. Let's continue with some more news. And next is also quite interesting stuff, dear friends. Secretary General of NATO does make headlines every now and then, right? And always for the wrong reasons, somehow. This personality, Mark Rutte, manages to make headlines always for all sorts of wrong reasons. And for example, I will show you now two short videos of Rutte when he's bragging about how powerful NATO is and how much more force, economical, military, NATO has compared to Russia. He's based on that statement, then he's saying that, well, because NATO is that strong, Russian planes that maybe will violate NATO's airspace should not be shut down if they are not posing immediate threat, right? And only question I have at this point, by the way, if Mark Rutte is saying to the whole world that NATO is incomparably more powerful than Russia in every possible way, then for God's sake, why this NATO member states leadership is terrifying their own citizens with this so-called imminent Russian attack when no such a threat exists, right? I mean, that's the question I have. Why these individuals that are in charge of Western countries are terrifying their own citizens with this non-existent Russian threat, and why they constantly are whining about more money that they constantly want, if they are already like 10, 20, 100 times more powerful than Russia. Why nobody is challenging these people? Why nobody is asking the right questions to receive interesting answers? I don't know. I don't know, but let me show you these short clips, dear friends, First, share your take in the comment section, what you will make of it. So this is first video.
That airspace is not the same as ground. There's a big difference militarily, but also politically. Please take that into account. And the only thing I'm encouraging all of us is to take comfort in the fact that as NATO, we are 25 times bigger than the Russian economy. Our military is infinitely superior to the Russian military when it comes to our Air Force. I mean, the Russians cannot even stand in the shadow with these MiG-31s or whatever they call them, with their not well-trained fighter pilots.
So that's one statement. And there is another one.
They are saying if a plane would pose a threat, we have the authorities to do, if necessary, the ultimate. But if the plane is not posing a threat, we are not going to shoot it down. And then we will gently guide it outside the airspace. This is exactly what they should do. And I totally agree with that approach, because we are so strong.
Proportional response.
It is proportional response, exactly. And we are so much stronger than the Russians. We don't have to take down Russian airplanes because they enter our airspace. We do it if they enter our airspace and also pose a threat. If we were weak, you might maybe think, okay, we are weak, so we have to immediately show them that whenever they enter our airspace, we shoot them down. But if they don't pose a threat, being so much stronger than the Russians, I think it is much stronger that our reaction is as it is, proportionate, and of course making clear to the Russians that we are not too happy about these incursions. Then.
So share your take, dear friends, in the comment section, what you make of these statements of Rutte, Secretary General of NATO. I will disagree with him that NATO is incomparably stronger militarily than Russia. This is definitely not true, because if there is a full-scale war between NATO and Russia, there are going to be no winners, right? No one going to win that fight. It's going to be extinction-level event for whole of humanity, right? So NATO cannot defeat Russia. It's just not possible. Same time, Russia cannot defeat all of NATO in a full-scale war, because this is also impossible, because these nukes, by the way, will deal with all of us, right? But nevertheless, on a point that Rutte is making there, that there is no need to open fire on the Russian planes immediately once you notice them. On that point, well, I will say this statement does make some sense, because there are some extreme hotheads in military and political leadership of NATO countries, especially, this Baltic Chihuahua, who was, by the way, Poland, some others, and they might very well want to provoke direct conflict between NATO and Russia, because those people that are in charge there in these countries are so stupid that they might not actually realize how dangerous their actions can be and what might follow, right? So in that sense, yes, it is important that if there is anyone with a sense in a NATO leadership, will make it clear to all NATO member states that they should not be trigger happy, right? Because this is extremely dangerous. And when it comes to this other part of the statements of Rutte, how powerful they are and how this and that, and how they're going to occupy Andromeda Galaxy, okay, that's a topic for discussion on other day, right? But main question once again is, if you are bragging about how powerful you are, why you are terrifying your own citizens with the non-existent Russian threat? And the Russian leadership was so clear and so many times that Moscow has no plans to attack no one, and if not provoke, no one will see any aggressive move from Russian Federation, militarily or otherwise. Russia is reacting on aggression. and hostility. Anyways, let's continue, dear friends. And when it comes to militarization of NATO, well, I did mention in today's first update on Patreon and Boosted that Belgium received its first 4 F-35A fighter jets, which means that in upcoming days, maybe a week or two, it would not take much longer. Denmark probably will begin transferring its F-16s to a Kiev regime, as it was stated earlier, which is, of course, yet another step towards the further escalation by NATO against Russia. And Moscow will have no option but to respond, isn't it? One way or another, but to respond. Also, TASS News Agency is reporting that, well, Bloomberg had an interesting Bloomberg media outlet, by the way, had interesting conversation with a number of officials in the West, and they come up with the article that Russian frozen assets are becoming their EU's last hope and resort, basically, to help Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky finance it and prolong this proxy war against Russia. Let me give you some details on that. The European Union is increasingly convinced that the only way to finance Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky is to use frozen Russian assets, as other sources are drying up. This was reported by Bloomberg, citing sources. According to these sources, Russian assets are key source of finance, since if the fighting continues, Kiev will need approximately $200 billion, in addition to whatever hundreds of billions of dollars and euros were allocated to finance this proxy war that against Russia, right? That West is waging. And the question is, these $200 billion are for a year, for 2 year, 3 year. It's not gonna last much longer, isn't it? Because according to reports that we have seen in open media, US has already financed this proxy war against Russia for $300 to $300 billion. Trump, president of US, is saying about it, right, openly. And EU member states, or European states, let's say, including UK, they financed for another 100+ billion euro, right? So they already spent $400 to $500 billion, one might argue. So how long this another $200 billion will last that Western so-called elites gonna steal from Russia, because it's a frozen Russian assets. That's the question I have, but there is no answers on that. On October 14, by the way, Russian ambassador to Belgium, Denis Gonchar, stated in an interview with the TASS that any attempt to seize Russian sovereign assets would be perceived as a theft, an illegal act that runs counter to existing norms of international law, which is factually accurate. Of course, this is going to be theft, and Western countries already are engaged in that theft, because they are formally, for now, they are only stealing profits from these frozen Russian assets. But at this point, I guess it's only like few days, maybe few weeks from now, when Western elites will make it clear that they're gonna steal these frozen assets too. And according to reports, in the Western jurisdictions, there is about 300 billion of Russian investments. And dear friends, if you have a question, what will Russia do in that case? I have said quite a few times before that according to reports, in Russian territory, there is in Russian economy, there is around 300 billion Western investments, right? $300 billion, potentially more if you count profits too, right? And once Western elites will go ahead with their stealing of Russian assets, I think Moscow will have no option but to confiscate Western investments in Russian Federation. I think Russia will mirror this kind of actions from the West, although this is my personal opinion. Maybe Moscow will take some other action, I don't know. But there is a possibility to retaliate for sure. Also, dear friends, interesting report is coming from, who would guess, from Afghanistan, from Talibani government, and spokesman from Afghanistani Taliban movement or Talibani government, Zabihullah Mujahid, accused Pakistan, by the way, of terrorist attacks on Iran and Russia. So Pakistan, and this is quote, Pakistan has started recruiting terrorists from various countries around the world and transferred those recruiters from western borders or through Karachi and Islamabad airports to its camps inside the country. They then train these individuals in Takfiri ideology. And dear friends, Taliban is a religious movement, right? Many people maybe don't know, but Taliban is a religious movement inside their Sunni Islam, right? And they have some issues with some other groups inside their Islam, and they are referring to those groups as a takfiri, right? Which is a not really pleasant way to address someone, right? But anyways, let's continue. And then this spokesman is saying, then they train these individuals in takfiri ideology, some extreme ideology. I mean, can you imagine when Taliban is calling someone extremist in ideology? Also in mass killing and sabotage operations. According to accurate and reliable information, we have ISIS Khorasan branch attacks in Kremlin city, in Kerman city, Iran, and also Crocus City Hall in Moscow in 2024 were designed, organized, and executed from these centers in Pakistan. And Russia and Iran are aware of this. I guess Taliban government of Afghanistan shared with the Russian and Iranian intelligence services information that they have in regards to this developments, and of course this information will be checked, and there are some steps will be taken. But if true, by the way, if true, then no one should be surprised that the Pakistani regime is engaged in terrorist attacks on other countries, and also in terrorist and also in fact that Pakistani regime is in cooperating with terrorist organizations, because just recently one of the leading figures in Pakistan, defense minister that was, or prime minister, publicly, by the way, during the interview stated that Pakistan was actually engaged in a terrorist activity on behalf of Western countries, US, UK, and so on. This was acknowledged publicly, right? And there is no reason not to believe that the Pakistani regime continues to be engaged with their terrorist organizations and assist Western secret services and their proxies, including Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky, to conduct terrorist attacks, right? And that's exactly what happened in the Crocus City Hall in the Moscow region, right next to Moscow, right, in 2024. And according to information that is available here in Russia in open sources, investigators are clearly documenting links between ISIS-K terrorist group and the Kiev regime. And I remind you, dear friends, that these terrorists that conducted this horrible terrorist attack on Crocus City Hall that took lives of more than 100 people, those terrorists were running towards their Ukraine's border when they were detained, right? And I think this information is definitely deserves our attention, and first of all, attention of their security services here in Russia and in Iran. And who knows, maybe soon we will learn some more about these developments. Probably we will learn more information about it, and some statements will be made in Tehran and Moscow RT, meanwhile, is reporting that disgraced Russian ex-oligarch is wanted now for a coup d'etat plot, according to Russia's FSB, which is Federal Security Service Bureau. So a criminal case has been launched in Russia against exiled former tycoon Mikhail Khodorkovsky and more than 20 other so-called opposition figures from this so-called Russian anti-war committee over an alleged plot for their violent seizure of the power and organization of a terrorist group. The Federal Security Service has stated Khodorkovsky amassed their fortune in 90s as a head of their now defunct Yukos oil company before his high-profile arrest in 2003. He was sentenced to 14 years in a prison after being convicted on charges including tax evasion and fraud, but was pardoned by Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2013. Unfortunately, the oligarch who left Russia shortly after his release is currently living in London, UK, by the way. There is always UK's involvement whenever there is some dodgy criminal activity against Russia. You trace back always, you trace back their facts, right? And you will link London to all these criminal activities that is plotted against Russian Federation, right? The oligarch who left Russia shortly after his release is currently living in London. In 2015, a Russian court issued an international arrest warrant for Khodorkovsky on charges of ordering a murder. The goal of their RAC, this terrorist organization, terrorist group that called themselves Russian Anti-War Committee, this is Western Secret Service's assets, by the way. These are traitors. All of them are traitors and the criminals, right? And should be punished without mercy, of course. So goal of this terrorist organization, RAC, which was established by Khodorkovsky in 2022, shortly after the escalation of the Ukraine conflict, is their violent seizure of power and their overthrow of the constitutional order in Russia, which is openly stated in the organization's founding documents, the FSB said in a statement on Tuesday, today, by the way. In their RIC documents, committee members claim that Putin's regime is illegitimate and criminal and must be liquidated. They also said they were looking to stop what they called Russian aggression against Ukraine. Moscow maintains that the Ukraine conflict was provoked by the West and that Russia is defending itself. In early October, the RAC took part in the establishment of their so-called platform for a dialogue with the Russian democratic forces at their parliamentary assembly of the Council of Europe. You can imagine level of engagement of Western elites in this terrorist criminal activity against Russia, by the way. Khodorkovsky presents their platform to Western countries as a constituent assembly for the transitional period and an alternative to the Russian government, the FSB stated. According to their agency, Khodorkovsky and his allies, including former world chess champion Garry Kasparov, scum of humanity, all of them are scum of humanity, former Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Kasyanov and opposition activists, so-called opposition activists Vladimir Kara-Murza and Andrei Pivovarov, who were freed during 2024 prisoner swap with the West, provide funding to Ukrainian nationalist paramilitary units designated as terrorist groups by Russia and also conduct recruiting activities for these units for their subsequent use in their plot of forceful seizure of power in the Russia. That's what her information said here. And well, if Russian security services were operating as Israeli secret services are operating, or British secret services, or US secret services, then none of these figures, by the way, none of these terrorists would be around, right? And I have a question: why Russian secret services are not operating in a most efficient way, right? Why they are not executing enemies of Russia? everywhere on this planet. US does it, right? US does it, by the way. US kills anyone and everyone they want, right? And at any point and any time on this planet. Israel does it. UK does it. Western world generally is always operated that way. And so why Russian security services being restricted from taking most effective measures to neutralize their enemies of the Russia, right? Why? That's the only question I have, by the way, because in my mind, I don't need statements of FSB, by the way. I know 100%, I'm 100% convinced, by the way, that all these criminals that run away from Russia and end up in UK, Germany, US, other Western countries, all of them are traitors and the criminals, right? And the terrorists, and should be dealt exactly as the terrorists and criminals deserve. As terrorists deserve, by the way, right? So yes, that's how it is, by the way. And I don't know how long this soft approach of Russian leadership going to continue towards enemies of Russia. I have no freaking idea, man. Right? This is not normal. This is not normal. You know. This is my personal take, by the way, right? And I have never said that I'm some sort of a pacifist and against any violence and stuff. No, I'm not against violence. Violence is absolutely necessary sometimes and has to be used, period, right? To defend the interests of your family, to defend your family, to defend your society, to defend your country, right? Violence sometimes can become absolutely necessary. Unfortunately, but that's the world we are living in, isn't it? This world is far away from being paradise. So that's the situation in regards to that information, which is a quite important one, I think. And timing, by the way, timing is also interesting. You know, I said quite a number of times in my updates that Western elites most likely during the next phase of escalation with Russia, which seems to me personally inevitable, will try to conduct decapitation strike on the political and military leadership of the Russian Federation. And you think who they will use for destabilization of Russia, for terrorist activity inside the Russian territory, sabotage activity, who they think should be, replacement of current government here in Russia if their decapitation strike and attempt to destabilize Russia and conduct a regime change is successful. Exactly these criminals, by the way, exactly these criminals, Khodorkovsky and the rest of the human scum, right? And their timing is very important. I think FSB knows much more than is shared with the public. And this decision, I 100% support this decision. It just maybe a bit late, right? We should do this kind of stuff earlier, but yet again, to declare these criminals on a wanted list, to put them on a wanted list is not enough. It's not enough. Some other steps are needed, and by the way, there is always a way. There's always a way to deal with their certain situations in such a style that people will say, well, things happened. This Khodorkovsky might walk on the street and some flower will fall from their balcony of some building and they're straight on his head, and minus one rabid animal on this world, right? In this world, no one will cry about it. It is what it is, man. Things sometimes needs to be done, and one way or another. And if Israel can do it, if US can do it, if UK can do it, and other Western countries, why cannot do it? Why we cannot do it, man? What the hell? We are in a war, right? Entire freaking West is waging war against us, and we have to use any means necessary to protect society of Russia and to protect Russia. Period. There is no discussion there. whatsoever. Any means go. Also interesting report here, by the way, that when it comes to terrorist regimes in the West, by the way, and all sorts of criminal terrorist activity, well, this information exactly on that topic, Poland demands from Germany to stop Nord Stream attacker prosecutions. Recently, Tusk, Prime Minister of Poland, said that for him personally, and I guess for Polish elites, terrorist attack on Nord Stream pipelines is not a crime. It's nothing extraordinary. They are concerned that people that are allegedly were engaged in this terrorist attack have been prosecuted by Germany and are on wanted lists. And one of those people that were set up from the beginning to be scapegoats is in Poland now, and Poland is refusing to hand him over to Germany despite Germany's request, right? And now Polish government is going even further than that, and they are just making demands from Germany to stop prosecuting elements that are allegedly guilty on this terrorist attack. Interesting, isn't it? Interesting. Western world is quite openly, and Poland is a part of Western world, right? Controlled by Washington and London, so they do whatever they've been ordered, right? And day in, day out, we have all those indicators, all those factual evidences that Western so-called elites and the regimes that they control all over the West, they don't care about anything. They will use any means, literally any means, in a confrontation with Russia, in confrontation with any other country, right? There is no red line that they would not cross. And when we know who we are facing, who is our enemy, I think some very serious decisions have to be made, by the way, political decisions, first of all, by Russian leadership to allow security services here in Russia to adopt certain methodics of fight against such an enemy. Because with the traditional means, you're gonna lose, by the way. With traditional means, you're gonna lose fight with these ones, with Western elites, because they will go all the way. They will use any means, and if you are not ready to use any means necessary, you're gonna end up in a weaker position, and we don't want that. We don't want Russia to be in a weaker position. We want exactly the opposite. So clearly, some very serious changes are necessary, man. Some very serious changes, right? And when it comes to this position of Polish government, one might ask her what our Polish leadership is doing. They are protecting their British and American masters with this position that Nord Stream terrorist attacks have to be forgotten and they're forgiven, or they are acting this way just because they are just extreme Russophobes, and they hate they hate Russia and everything Russia. Which one is? Or maybe both statements is true. They are protecting their American masters and the British masters that actually planned this terrorist attack on Nord Stream pipelines, and same time they are doing it happily because Polish elites are famous, or infamous, by the way, for being extreme Russia haters, right? Just factually accurate statement there. RIA Novosti are also reporting, and there are a couple of news difference on some other topics, other regions. RIA Novosti is reporting that Israel shelled Gaza despite the ceasefire, according to Hamas. So Israeli army launched an attack on the Gaza Strip and opened fire on the local residents despite the ceasefire agreement. Hamas spokesman Hassem Qassem stated today on Tuesday, 14th of October, and we have a quote here. This morning, the Israeli army launched an airstrike in the Gaza Strip, killing several residents. This is considered a violation of the ceasefire agreement. We again call on all parties to monitor Israel's actions and not to allow it to shirk its obligations to their mediators to end the war in Gaza, statement said. And well, we have a statement from IDF too, according to which 5 Palestinians were shot dead after allegedly crossing a designated buffer zone in Gaza City. Israeli troops reportedly opened fire after the group refused to retreat, which is total nonsense, by the way. They say Israeli fascists saw civilians and they just killed them. No warnings, no nothing. They just killed them. 100% convinced in that. 100%. That's what fascists do, by the way, right? And Israelis, most of them, majority of Israelis are freaking fascists, period. And no one should be surprised that Israel is violating this ceasefire, because I said from very beginning of this process that only way to achieve peace, actual peace in Palestine and in a wider Middle East, only way to to achieve this is to demilitarize and denazify Israel. There is no other options there. If we are realists, right? If we are real here, there is no other way. By the way, fascist Israel is not gonna stop killing people left and right, because they don't even consider them to be humans. And Trump, during his flight back to US from Egypt, made a statement. Basically, he avoided to make it clear that US supports two-state solutions. He said that I'm not talking about single state or double state or two-state. We are talking about the rebuilding of Gaza. And he's talking about rebuilding again. Clearly, by the way, this is also a deception operation. It's a matter of days. And Israeli Secret Services, with assistance of US Secret Services, British Secret Services, will orchestrate a false flag operation. They will blame it on Palestinians and they will resume genociding Palestinian people. And Trump knows that, and he cannot hide it. He was asked about two-state solution, and he's talking about, well, we're going to rebuild Gaza. Probably he already sees some buildings with their Trump Tower signs on it and that kind of stuff, man. He cannot help himself. This genocidal maniac, by the way, that is no any less guilty in the death of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians than Netanyahu is. Because US, I remind you, dear friends, that US assisted Israel in this genocide of Palestinian people and the crime against humanity with their 21 to 31 billion dollars. $21 billion in direct military aid and also about $10 billion in other assistance. And I can give you a short video. I think I do have a short clip of Trump's statement there. Let's see.
I wanted to ask you about your conversations with world leaders today. You said that everybody is unified over your plan, but we heard from President Sisi calling for a two-state solution and independent Palestinians.
Well, you're talking about a different plan. I'm talking about something very much different. We're talking about rebuilding Gaza. I'm not talking about single state or double state or two-state. We're talking about the rebuilding of Gaza.
What's the road ahead for governing
Gaza?
Well,
we're going to have to see. I mean, a lot of people like the one-state solution. Some people like the two-state solution. So we'll have to see. I haven't commented on that.
How do you see bridging that gap? Because you have the Arab countries.
At some point, I'll decide what I think is right, but I'd be in coordination with other states and other countries.
So he avoided the answer, by the way, on the question. He went one way or another way. but he avoided answer. While two-state solution is not somebody's idea. This is a direction that was that world community come up with in UN, right? That from the beginning, by the way, they should supposed to be two states, right? When Israel was created, Palestinian state supposed to be created immediately. But Israel Zionists and Western backers of the Zionists never allowed this to happen. And from the very day of creation of Israel, these Israeli fascists are killing innocent Palestinian people, forcing them out of their historical homeland, right? And they continue to nowadays act this despicably. So it is what it is, man. It's freaking fascists. Only way to achieve peace in the Middle East is to demilitarize and denazify Israel. Period. There is nothing to discuss there, really. Right? Let's continue with a few more news, dear friends. This update is still more than an hour, man. Still more than an hour. So, you know what? I will leave rest of the news for this evening's update, and let's end the second update on that. So hopefully you did find this update informative and interesting. And if so, please like the video, leave some commentary. If you want to support your friends, links are under this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. There was no question either through super chat or through a PayPal or Boosty to highlight or to react. So therefore, I will end the live stream on that term. Thank you all for your attention. Have a wonderful day. And if you have a time, join today's evening live stream at 10 p.m. Moscow time. I will try my best to prepare interesting news update for you, dear friends. This is it for now. Take care.